From Florida's Space Coast, this is Your Career.
Welcome to Your Career. I'm your host, Debbie Featherston, and with me today are three organizational consultants. These gentlemen bring a wealth of experience and backgrounds. For any of you that are interested in organizational consulting, tune in and stay for the entire segment. With me, I have Reggie Crane, who is president of Next Level Coaching, and Curtis Curry, who is the president of Quality Learning International, and Karl Lieb, president of the Character Corporation. Thank you, gentlemen. Right out of the gate, topic that is near and dear to all of our heart, leadership development. How are organizations doing with developing leaders today?
This last summer I was in a company, and one of the things that they were doing was a huge lack of leadership that they were experiencing in this global company. And they were investing a tremendous amount of energy and effort, time and money in trying to get their management up to a level of leadership to where the employees started to follow them. Now that was an exceptional case, and my fear is not all those companies that are out there are making that kind of commitment. At least that's what I'm seeing.
Reggie?
Yeah, what I've seen is in organizations, I think there's a struggle with trying to define what management is and what leadership is, and to make that transition from managing things and people and resources to actually leading people in a way where you're developing them to be future leaders. I think additionally, there's this idea of relevancy, right? From a leadership standpoint, understanding why your organization is relevant today in terms of, what makes you, what value do you bring that nobody else is bringing, and then being able to, at the same time, understand what things need to be done in the future to allow you to continue to remain relevant in the out years. I think that's really a core leadership competency that is missing today, and it's not anybody's fault, right? I think it's just the way that organizations kind of develop their people. They once thought that this whole idea of managing was actual leadership, and now trying to find a way to bridge that gap between, managing to leading is a struggle for a lot of organizations who are trying to find a way to bridge that gap.
The pace, the rate of change has really accelerated in the last few years. Is that yes or no? What do you think?
I think that probably has a lot to do with it. Companies know that they need to align their leadership development programs to the overall goals and mission of the company. Yet, still, there are a lot of organizations out there that don't take the time to do a needs analysis. So if you don't do a needs analysis, how can you know where the gaps are among your leaders?
We've brought up this issue of gaps a couple times. What are some of the skill gaps that you see among leadership?
It goes right back to what Reggie was saying. The whole reason they brought me in was because their management team, well over 67%, 70%, were people that had worked their way from the floor up. And so there they are as a manager, but no one has taught them how to lead the employees. And that's a huge gap because there's a whole different skill set.
So they really lack the people development skill. That's a very common problem. Reggie, I hear you, see you nodding there.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point. Most of my clients, 90% are government clients, right? And so you see it play out a lot there where folks come in at a very low level and they do a really, really good job, and they work their way up to the upper managerial leadership roles. Well, from a standpoint of developing those individuals, what I find is that there are standard ways that people are sent out to get certain training and come back in. But it's not like placed on a continuum where it's like, okay, Reggie, here's where you are right now as a manager, right? And so now it's like 7 years from now, you're going to be in a leadership role. So therefore, you're going to go out and get this training and come back in. And then we're going to have you apply it in this area. So you're continually transitioning from management into leadership. There's a lot of training going on, but it's almost like training is the answer that they think is going to develop leaders, and I think it's just not in a cohesive manner with a target in mind.
Nor
it just seems
once they get back.
That's interesting because what I'm hearing you say today is what I was hearing in the early 80s. I don't see that we've made much movement here in the past 30 years or so from what I'm hearing. I'm wondering, what percentage of the companies that you're working with around leadership development really use leadership or competency models, or what kind of assessment tools do they have?
Yeah, one of the things, and Curtis knows a lot about models, but just you mentioned the 80s compared to today, and I think we are seeing a bit of a difference from back then. Because we were still feeling the military style command control back in the 80s, and you just don't get away with that much anymore in this environment. So
that's not tolerated, is it?
Not from the employees. They'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
My customers are primarily in the private sector, and I work with mostly large organizations. I think all of the organizations I work with, whether government or private sector, have competency models. Some, again, are much better than others at developing leaders, because to Reggie's point earlier about what people need to be effective leaders differs greatly among supervisory level versus mid-level versus executive. So an early career high potential has a lot of different kind of learning that he or she needs to do to move up to that next level. There's been a lot of discussion lately about a leadership pipeline. And so companies, I think, are more interested in developing that pipeline because, frankly, most companies don't believe they have the people on board with the leadership skills they need to drive their businesses into the future.
Or even the potential, because they haven't gone out into the organization trying to figure out what potential they really have. And so they think the pipeline's dry.
Interesting.
Yeah, and to the point earlier, right, about, like, say, understanding what the organization really is all about. What is the real core mission or purpose of the organization? Not a lot of organizations spend a whole lot of time in that area, right? And so when you mentioned the whole idea about change earlier, it's kind of hard to really embrace change if you don't have clarity about, okay, here is where I'm at right now. Here is why what we do today is really relevant. And so now when we start talking about changing, how do we implement change to bridge that gap in a way where it allows us to maintain or enhance that relevance that we have today into the future? That kind of a concept, and to be fair with people out there, I mean, there's a lot of work going on in organizations, so I don't want this to sound like just bashing managers, because I get that they got a lot of stuff going on, and so they're trying to do things on the fly and do the best job that they can. But at the same time, with all due respect to that, when there's just this rapid, let's do this to fix this and move on, let's get this training and let's bring it in here and not understand how to use it and make it work, it gives the appearance as though we're doing some really good things here, but in reality, in terms of the results that's being produced, as you said, you don't see a whole lot of different results now than you did back in the 80s.
And I'm just saying, based on this conversation, my personal experience is a little different because I'm working with companies that are very committed to leadership development, and they're beginning to make those steps. They have challenges, but they're continually trying to refine those programs. So, but it's just curious from your perspective what you're seeing and what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I would add something too, that it really depends on your leaders, your leadership development leaders inside the organization, because organizations themselves can be doing a very good job, and a leader comes in and all of a sudden things change. So I think leadership in our field is very, very important. And so you do see organizations that are very committed to developing their leaders, because they know without good leaders, they're not going to be able, again, to drive their business into the future.
And you come right back full circle to your thing about change. Change in whose mind is it important? Does the employee sit there and actually see the value of that change? What's it mean to me doing my everyday job is it meaningful? And if the leaders of the organization can find a way to transfer that meaningfulness of the change, that's half the battle.
It really is.
Skilled enough to do that.
It really is. And, when Curtis was talking just now about, developing leaders, that's a kind of nebulous term based on what organization you're in terms of what defines an effective leader. And so that definition of an effective leader, in my opinion, it has to come back down to the core of what that organization is trying to do and building that effective leader to ensure the organization is able to operate at its maximum capacity today and into the future. But with that lack of connectivity sometimes, we do a great deal of developing leaders. I mean, in terms of sending them out to courses and making sure that they got the latest and the greatest techniques and tools and techniques. But that in and of itself does not make a leader.
Another thing that makes that even more difficult is that it's a moving target.
Yeah.
Because the world changes.
Yeah.
In a recent study, for example, this was a DDI study, showed that 67% of organizations have a globalization. They're going to expand their global market presence. And when they were polled and the question was asked among its HR leaders, do you have the talent to do that? Only 22% said, yes, we have the existing talent to be able to expand into these new international markets. So that alone is a huge gap.
And then you try and sit there and you say, okay, 22%, are they smart enough to figure out what they really need on a global point of view to backfill those spots? Because it's different when you're talking international, intercultural, and all those other things that you know so well.
So there might be other skill sets that really have a greater importance depending on the environment that they're working in. Yeah, geographic area. So, given some of the challenges that leaders are facing today and that we anticipate that they're going to face in the near future, what's really more the focus, or what do you feel should be more the focus of leadership development?
Well, we created a model, a 5-part model, right, that we think if there's enough awareness and understanding raised around these 5 key areas, not only does it develop leaders, but it allows everybody in the organization to communicate at a really, really effective rate, and which we believe translates directly into performance outcomes, right? So self-awareness and self-management, interpersonal relationships, team effectiveness, organizational focus, which is mission, vision, and values, and leadership effectiveness in terms of bringing it all together. We feel like if you can raise the right level of awareness and understanding around those 5 key areas by placing people on continuums in terms of providing them certain things at certain times, that is just one of several ways to go at trying to develop effective leaders.
What are some of the programs that, or I should say program components that you're seeing that companies are including in leadership development? For example, what is coaching a part of that? You talked about the importance of assessing and the competency model. How would somebody structure, what are some of those core elements that you feel are vital to a strong leadership development program? Let me just ask that.
When Reggie's talking about the model, excuse me, that's unbelievably solid. But all companies are not going to go do all 5 at one time.
Right, right. Very comprehensive.
We've all talked about that before. One of the things that I see a lot of times they'll do is they'll go after the relationship building, which seems to be one of the critical aspects of the management versus employee relationship. That relationship needs to be solid so everything else doesn't just go haywire.
Right.
I will go in a lot of times, and that's the whole purpose of my presence, is how can I help them establish better relationships with the employees as opposed to an oppositional relationship. And that's if they get that down, then we go into the other aspects of a model like that. But until they get that, nothing else is going to work.
The focus on self-awareness is really important. I think we do have some pretty good data that suggests that the competencies that are most important for different jobs do change, and for different levels of leadership do change. So some of the tools we use to help increase self-awareness, because I agree with Reg, it starts with self-awareness. Yeah. The 360-degree multi-rater feedback tools, so that an individual gets feedback from the leader, from their peers, from from employees they manage, sometimes from customers. That's great when you can get feedback from your customers as well.
Right.
We use other kinds of tools that help people understand their preferences when adapting to change, their decision-making preferences. Conflict style. Herman Brain Dominance Instrument is another tool that I use quite a bit. Thinking styles. So those are some elements. Coaching is another element. Mentoring is very, very important. Providing individual leaders with assignments, new assignments, new areas of responsibility, increasing their responsibility, maybe not too much too fast, but experience is still probably overall the best teacher.
You know, I'm curious, out of you all here as consultants, do you very often get called in so that you can administer self-assessments, or is that something that they realize after you try to explain to them the value of it? Because I don't usually get called in and say, can we do self-assessments of our managers? They got a problem, they want it fixed, but they don't think about self-assessment initially until we really start to talk about it. Same experience?
Yeah, I've kind of had it both ways. I've gotten calls to come in and do assessments, but they've been most effective when I've come in and kind of sat down and just kind of walked them through. We got a high-level diagnostic, right, that we walk them through and explain each 5 areas of the model, and we allow them to kind of prioritize which is most beneficial for them at that particular point in time.
Right.
And so once they make that decision, then we go behind the curtain, right, and pull out whatever assessments might be germane to helping them to address the specific area that they've identified. And so I've seen it both ways, and I've also seen situations where you come in to do an assessment, and if it's a low-culture organization, there's a lot of pushback to the debriefing, to sharing their results. I once did a gig one time where it took almost 3 hours to convince this audience that your leadership does not want to use the assessment. It's a whole different kind of party. So I've seen it both ways.
Yeah, I think the consulting aspect of what we do, I mean, this show is titled Organizational Consulting, is very important, and that's the fact-finding up front. So we really understand what the pain points are for the customer, what the main issues are. Being very skilled at asking those questions and being willing to dig deep is an important part of what we do. I don't, my experience is similar to yours in terms of just selling surveys. I don't do that.
Yeah. No, very interesting, very interesting. Good question there. Thank you very much. So let's introduce another dimension to this leadership development. What role does EQ, emotional intelligence, really play with leadership development? Or how does it impact leadership?
Why are we all looking at you, Reggie?
High EQ?
I think it's a really, really important area, right? It's getting a whole lot more traction nowadays. But I think at the core of it, it's about a set of social and emotional skills that kind of influence the way that we perceive ourselves, the way we communicate with others, the way that we develop and maintain social relationships, deal with challenges, and just use emotional information in a meaningful way. And so I know it kind of sounds, maybe touchy-feely, like a lot of assessments do to a degree. But one of the things that really hit me about EQ is the experts say that when we experience data, like we smell things, touch them, feel it, we process those informations in our system through electrical impulses, right? And it enters at the base of our brain, and as it makes its way through our frontal lobe, it passes through this system called the limbic system, where all emotions are generated. So everything that we encounter, we experience it emotionally first. And so when I read that, it just really, it was eye-opening, because I just didn't think that I was experiencing everything emotionally first, but you are. And so with that being said, I think it's really important to kind of get that, right? Because without that awareness, I think it feeds right into sometimes showing up in ways that we don't realize that we're showing up in. And
Give me an example of how emotional intelligence might show up in leadership development.
Well, as an example, right, let's just say, for instance, from a self-awareness standpoint, which is defined as understanding what you're feeling, when you're feeling it, but more importantly, why you're feeling it. I'm a boss, and I walk into the organization this day, and I'm driving into work, and somebody cut me off, man, and maybe gave me the finger, and I'm really just irate about this. I come in at 8:15. I got a meeting set for 8:20. Understanding the state that I'm in at that particular point in time, understanding why I'm feeling that way, what's generating this emotion, and the emotion that I'm feeling right now, it'd be smart for me to say, hey, look, folks, I know it may be an inconvenience for you, but let's push this meeting back a little bit right now because I am not physically and emotionally ready to participate in that meeting. Now, taken to I mean, you can look at that in any particular situation, right, as far as self-awareness is concerned. If you are not in control of what's happening with you and you allow yourself to come into a situation where you know that you're not ready to deal with that emotionally, you know, are you doing yourself any good? Are you doing the team any good? Are you promoting to an effective outcome of what you're trying to be involved in? Probably not, because you're just not ready to participate.
And what kind of a role model are you really being?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know.
So interesting. Other thoughts around this subject?
Well, those behaviors also that come out of that emotional response have very negative consequences in organizations. High turnover, people dragging their feet, people not wanting to be there, presenteeism, all kinds of negative effects. So emotional intelligence is one of those areas where people can develop competency. That's the good news. We're not born automatically being emotionally intelligent, but we can develop those social skills and those individual self-control skills that can help us be more effective.
And the positive side to his scenario, the more you're aware of that, the more you're aware of that EQ part, that manager, that person that was going to hold that meeting has the opportunity to recognize what's going on and divorce that situation to the situation that he now finds himself. And he can do it a lot quicker, only if you're aware. We probably all know people that if something goes wrong for 1 minute of their day, they carry it all day long.
Right.
All day.
And that's one of the positives. If you're aware of it, I can change that.
That's really, typically shows up like, I'm having a bad day.
Yes.
It's kind of a warning to us all, right? That's low emotional intelligence in my mind, right?
You can overcome it.
Okay.
It's like me raising the little girl.
Right.
She'll do something and it'll just set me off.
Your daughter.
Yes, my daughter. And I'm sitting here as a dad saying, I'm letting this little 4-year-old upset me. And this is crazy. And if I just immediately understand what I'm doing, I calm down almost immediately. And if I calm down, guess what? She calms down.
Oh, you bet.
If you, the boss, calm down, your employees calm down.
Right.
And that's all part of that makeup.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Reggie.
And the beauty of this is because of the fact that you can change behaviors on a dime. It's not asking you to shift from being an introvert to an extrovert. It's saying that when you find yourself in a situation, as an example, when you're, say, you're having a conversation, and empathy is one of the elements, right? In terms of being able to like suspend your reality for a few minutes and allow yourself to really see the world through somebody else's eyes. Each of us can do that at the drop of a dime. It doesn't require like a whole lot of practice trying to, move from one personality preference to another. That's what makes EQ a really, really powerful tool to utilize because you can actually make those adjustments in the moment.
Who are some people that we should be paying attention to in the area of EQ?
Multi-Health Systems out of Canada they run a lot of the assessments, and Howard Book and I think it's William Stein who wrote the book about the EQ Edge. They're in charge of that organization, and they're doing some really, really innovative things with EQ insofar as areas of people, government executives, school teachers, policemen, and doing EQ work in those areas to allow people to understand what somebody was mentioning earlier, what the EQ elements are that contribute most to success in those respective areas. And I think it's a really, really powerful place that they're trying to bring EQ right now, because the whole idea is that as you raise your EQ awareness, it should allow you to perform a whole lot more effectively, right? And so I think the work that they're doing, creating these databases out there where you can understand how EQ is showing up amongst those top performers in those areas is really, really powerful.
Yeah, very interesting. And there's new information that I've read that EQ actually can be a predictor of a person's success in leadership.
I think
Pre-show, Curtis had some stats.
yeah, he was
You want me
talking.
to share my stats?
That's what we're looking at. What were the stats?
We have 1
Okay,
minute. You got one or two
Yeah,
stats?
this is one research study that tried to look at the financial implications of emotional intelligence, and it found that individuals who have high levels of emotional intelligence compared to individuals who have very low levels of emotional intelligence earn on average $29,000 a year. For every 1 point increase in your level of emotional intelligence, of EQ, you can add $1,400 to your annual salary. Now, I wouldn't guarantee to people if you develop your emotional intelligence, you're going to make a lot of money, but the research indicates that.
You're probably going to end up being a leader that people really want to follow, and with that, that's going to have to be the final word. Thank you very much. You've been watching Your Career, and with me, my guest, Reggie Crane, Curtis Curry, and Karl Lieb. Thank you, gentlemen. On behalf of all my guests and the crew on the set, thank you for watching, and remember, be career happy.
More information about this program is available online at millermediagroup.org.